Hey, kia ora, Helen Brahms here, coming to you live from Sun City in Arizona. Hope you're all having a super fantastic, sparkling day. Welcome to Before the Dirt Nap podcast number 1174. We are in Family History Month, and tonight we're talking about glancing sideways. I've always wanted to be a spy. You got to keep an eye on everything going on around you and all that. Anyway, that is not on point for tonight. Although it is a pretty cool idea, isn't it? Could be a good title for a book, Glancing Sideways. You never know. Anyway, so what is Glancing Sideways all about? Sometimes when you're looking through your genealogy, you're working up your tree, you're going to, you start with remember, we're starting with what we know. So we start with our own information. We then look at our parents' information, our grandparents, great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents. By the time you get to your second great-grandparents, there's actually 32 people in your tree, which is a lot if you think about it. I won't mention I have like 7,800 in mine, but I know there's some mistakes in there, especially in the later stuff, and the further back stuff, I should say, not the later stuff, because the later stuff the further back stuff, there are some errors in there from when I was young and didn't know much about what I was doing. But I'm slowly correcting those as I come across them. But anyway, so what is glancing sideways? Well, sometimes when we're looking for those direct ancestors, so we're doing our pedigree chart. Our pedigree chart is parents, grandparents, great-grandparents, great-great-grandparents, third great-grandparents, fourth great-grandparents, and so forth and so forth and so forth. With each generation, you double the number of grandparents that you have. So you start with you, which is 1. The next level is parents. There's 2 of them. Next level is grandparents. There's 4 of them. And then you double to 8 for great-grandparents and 16 for second great-grandparents. And by the time you get to that stage, you actually have 32 people in your tree. But sometimes we trip up and we come across people with similar names or similar dates, places, that sort of thing. You're like, where do I go next? And how do I differentiate between these 2 people? Because I've got this one here and this one here, very similar in their things. How do I know? What do you know about their siblings? So one of the things that we always encourage you to do is not just go straight back on your pedigree line, also look sideways. Who are the siblings? So we're going to glance to the side and have a look at the siblings over here. Glance to the side and have a look at the siblings over here. How do you find siblings? Census reports. They could be on census reports. If you can look at school yearbooks or school rosters, school records, seeing if there is people of the same last name that went to school there. They could be a sibling as well. You can also look on, census reports, on some death certificates, and we talked about this yesterday. On some death certificates, it may have one of the children that provided the information, or it could be one of those death certificates that said how many children did this woman have, and how many are still living, and what are their ages. And so you know that there's people around those ages. Other ways that you can do that is just about any record out there, especially if you've got a wedding notice in a newspaper. A wedding notice in a newspaper, especially earlier on, would talk about who the bride was, who the groom was, where they'd been to school, what they were studying, what their occupations were, where they were going to be living afterwards. They are the son or daughter of this particular couple, and most of the time it might have Mr. and Mrs. Jones or Mr. and Mrs. John Jones. So you have no idea who the mother's name is unless you find the marriage records. And the indexes may or may not list who it is. It might be on the actual certificate. Then you've got, I think I have an ear infection coming on. Yeah. Anyway, what am I trying to thought? Then look at who the attendants were, because in newspaper articles, especially those back in the 60s, the 50s, the 40s, the 30s, the 20s, the 10s, the 100s, and into the 1800s, it would list who the bridal party was and how they were related to the bride or groom. So it may turn around and list the women out that were the bridesmaids and might have sister of bride, sister of groom next to it. So those are another good place to find siblings. But when you find sibling records, then start researching the siblings like you do everybody else, because it could be that you may find a record under their name that may give you more information about their parents, or it might give more information about the person you're actually researching. So you can get other records that way as well. Who were the witnesses for the wedding? That's another way to find siblings, because sometimes siblings were the witnesses for weddings as well. Sometimes it was parents that were the witnesses to the weddings. Yeah, there's all sorts of places you can go and find these little bit of details and stuff like, if there's a social get together, you may have, it was a birthday party for one of the members. Like I said, I found a newspaper article one time for a family I was researching, and it was for their son's 10th birthday, and they listed everybody that was present, and it was in a newspaper article. And this was back in the early 1900s in California, and they had an article talking about their son's 10th birthday, and had all the guests listed, and the guests were listed as uncle, aunts, cousins, that sort of thing. And it's like, ooh, this is fun. And so you'd write out all the names, and then it was like matching. You had to play the matching game. It was easier when there was a sister who had married, because she had a different last name, so you could easily match her kids up. And it was a process of elimination at that point. And then you could kind of put, these people are here, this must be the brother's kids here, because he had 3 sisters. And so here's the sisters with all their married names. Here's their kids. They were easy to put. So the other ones must belong to the brother. Penciled in with little notes saying maybe. And then going and doing the research. So again, researching siblings, cousins can help as well. Researching other members in the family instead of just those pedigree lines, those straight lines, can lead to information about the person that you're actually researching. And like I said, there could be documents. There could be a marriage certificate for a sibling, which lists the parents on there, yet for the person that you're researching who's in your direct line, it may just have a marriage index. There is no certificate unless you actually order it. So by searching for a sibling, you may find that a couple of years later, they were actually putting the certificates out there, or the licenses out there, or the church records out there, but not in the year that your grandparent, great-grandparent, or whatever got married. It was just an index. So you may find a relation that way as well. You may have an idea of what the person, like, there's one I'm researching right now, and I hit a bump in the road, and I was like, ooh, that could be tricky, because the person I'm researching had in there who his parents were. So I have been researching a lot about the parents, and I also found he had at least one sibling that I know of. So I'm researching her to try and get information about their parents, because he mentioned these parents. The only record I can find so far in the country I'm having to research is for a couple that got married over 40 years before he was born. Excuse me. Well, if they were in their 20s when they got married, they would be in their 60s, which means they could possibly be the grandparents and not the parents of the person I'm researching. So now I'm taking a deep dive into the sister to see what information I can find about her, to see who she has listed as her parents. And it could be that the grandparents raised the children. Something happened to their parents, and they were raised by their grandparents and just thought that they were mom and dad. So you never know what's going on. You never know what's happening. Always keep an open mind, and always look, take that time to look sideways, because you never know what you're going to find. And, you keep your research, and you keep your research log going as to, and I have, those that know me know that I write. I don't use, I'm missing the orange one. Oh, and the red one. Oops. That's the wrong red one. That's not the red one. This is the red one I use. So when I write, I actually use different colored pens. And each colored pen when I first start is for the information that I know about the person. So what their name was when they were born, and I pick a main color for them. For this one, I'm using purple. For his sister, it's orange. And then I have these other colors available that I have used for his children. So That's his children, his wife, no, his daughter-in-law. So his children, his daughter-in-law, his son-in-law. Oh, and that's the other thing that when you glance sideways too, is that you can look at the spouses. If you know the name of the spouses, you can look up information for them, because you may then come across the marriage record. You may not be able to find the marriage record under the daughter's name or the son's name, simply because they may have misspelt it. And that's the other thing you have to be aware of, is the misspellings. So you use a thing called they use a thing called Soundex, which sounds like. And my mother-in-law, on her maiden name, when I go searching for hers, I have like 17 different spellings of her maiden name, the name that the last name she was born with, because it depends who's doing the writing on the census at the time as to what they hear and what they write down. And if the people that they're getting the information of don't, they're just sitting there with their book and they're just writing the information down, and unless somebody's actually watching and going, no, that's not how that's spelt, it gets put in there how they hear it and how they think it's spelt. So it's kind of interesting that so you got to look for different spellings. And I have found spellings, I'm like, how the heck did they get that word from that person's name? I have come across some of those on the census reports, where it's just some I knew what area that they were in. I did the long way of researching in a census report. I brought up the census report from somebody else I knew was in the area, because it was this family that lived in this particular area. So I started with the family members I knew and found them all on the census report. And you can actually, if you go and look online, there's places where you can go and get maps of the route the enumerator took on some of them. And in some other places, there's maps you can get of what the layout of the town was like at that particular time in history, because borders change, counties change. There was one we were looking at in one of the genealogy classes, and they showed, like, here's the map of the county. And then they pressed this button, they pressed a button, and you can see it, all these county lines changing, and this big county was put into smaller pieces, then into even smaller pieces and smaller pieces. And you can see the town sitting there the entire time and just watching the counties change around it. It was just fascinating. And then they combined counties again. So we went to bigger counties and we went back to smaller. I was like, oh my gosh, no wonder we as genealogists have so much trouble finding things at times, because we have to know what county were they in at the time the event happened, because the boundaries may have changed. And what town were they in? And we start off with what town were they in. That's why you always start with the smallest common denominator, like what was the name of the town, the city, the village, and then you go, what county was it in? What state, province, territory was it in? What country was it in? So that's why you always start with the lowest thing there. Sometimes I will even go, screw this, I'm just putting in the name of the church. Here's the church, here's the street it was on, here's the town it was in. So I'll put like the full address. The church on 123 Main Street in Anywhere Town, in this in somewhere county, in whatever state, territory, province it was, or anything like that. So don't forget to look sideways. That's another place of parish records when you're looking for people with similar names. If you happen to know what the siblings' names are, if you've come across the census reports, and some people will turn around and please do not do this. They see a census report and they go, oh, I found them. This is the right name. The parents' names are correct. There's the great grandfather or whatever on the thing. He's got 9 siblings. Wow. And then they just copy and paste that into their tree, and it's like the wrong person, because they didn't take time to research further. Yes, you may find a census report. Is there another family that is similar, that has a mother and a father of the same name with the person you're researching in? This is when knowing some of the names of the siblings comes in and helps as well, because then you go through and go, well, hang on. He's supposed to have a sister called Anne. She's not on here. She would have been born around there, because she's only a couple of years younger than him. Then I don't see her on this list. And then you go to the other family. Well, there's his name, and there's Anne. So this could be them. And then you find another family. Oh, now we've got the same parents. We've got the main person we're looking for, say John, and there's his sister Anne, 2 years younger. So now you've got 2 families that are very similar. And so that's when you've got to start researching and doing comparisons and things, and seeing and figuring out which one is the correct family. Where were they living? What information do you know about where they were living? Do you have you looked up the titles or the deeds of the property of where they were living? If they were farmers, they probably had a deed to the title to the land. So what land records are there about that as well? And so there's different places that you can go and find this information. But don't forget, when you are researching your direct line, your direct ancestors, don't forget to glance sideways to help you find more information. It could be that you're looking for the grandmother, and you're sort of like, oh, now I know they were in this area, and then you find the land records for the farm that has been in the family for generations, it's still in the family today, and you go back and you have a look, and there could be something in the records about, or even a will or probate, where it shows the land was passed on to the brother. Oh, and here's another one. Here's the siblings listed and what they get. So probates, wills, those things are always good too for looking for siblings as well. So I'm trying to find the siblings for this person here. I know he has one sister because he actually mentioned her as his next of kin on his military record. So I've got her and I've got him, and I don't know how old she is. I know she was married at the time when he joined up with the military because she had a different last name. So I know what her last name is. I think I may have found her, but the problem is that, and her husband has a very unusual middle name. Do you think I can find any records of them with that husband's unusual middle name? Absolutely not. I haven't been able to crack that one yet, but I'm still working on it because I haven't exhausted all my resources yet. It's, when you're researching stuff, you've got to exhaust all possibilities. Have you checked all the records? I have her addresses for 2 years, and I know where she was in 2 years. I know where she was where she was living when her brother joined the military, and I know where she was just before he got out of the military because they put a change of address in there for her. So I have 2 places that she was living. So I'm going to see what I can find on those 2 addresses and see if I can find out more information that way. And so, you gotta go looking and things like that too. And I have this one family which could possibly be the sister, but I'm missing information to make that connection. So while I'm researching this family, I think that is the sister's family. I'm also very conscious of the fact that it may not be, and I'm keeping my eyes open for other possibilities and exhausting places I can go and look to try and find out more information about this family over here that I think might be his sister. I haven't found the marriage records yet. That is the only thing holding me up. I need to find the marriage records to find out what her name was, because the marriage records will put on there who she was. And I have the husband's full name with the very unusual middle name. Yeah, I think I can find any records with his middle name on it. Nope. Like, really? It should be easy. He's got an unusual name. It should be easy. It's not. So even unusual names do help make things easier, but it depends on whether they use that name or maybe they were known by a nickname and not the full name. So now you got to figure out what possible nicknames he could have. Was he known by his first name or his middle name? Did he have a nickname? Because sometimes those can play a role in things as well. And then on census reports, you'll see some names abbreviated, like WM is William. What's the other one? THOS is Thomas. CHAS is Charles. So you've got names like that where you will see these abbreviations written on census reports because the enumerator was sort of like, I ain't writing that name. I'm just going to put down Chad, so I'm going to put down Thos, or I'm going to put down WM, and things like that. So they had a lot of ways of abbreviating. So you need to know what those abbreviations are as well for names because it can help you decipher. And then some of the documents I'm looking at, because I'm looking in records in Quebec and Canada, are in French. Google Translate to the rescue. It may not do a perfect job, but at least it gives me enough information to know whether or not I'm on the right record, if I have the right record, and it will give me basic information to say, yes, this is the right record that I need. Nope, not that one. So Google Translate can help in some situations when you're dealing with foreign documents and you don't have anybody available that speaks the language that can translate for you. It's not the best translator in the world, so I have been told, since I only speak English, I'm not aware of this, But it gives me enough to know, is this a marriage record, a death record, a land record? Who are the people in there? What is written on the census report? What questions did they ask on the census report? Things like that. Because some of the census reports for Quebec are fully in English. The forms are in English. The writing is all in English, and other ones you've got French forms all written in French. And so you've got to go and translate them. And sometimes it is the same record. It's written in both English and French. And I'm like, well, isn't that interesting? I came across that one yesterday with one of the documents I was looking at. I found an English copy of the census report and a French copy of the census report, exactly the same page. I'm like, okay. And in other places, they only have either French or English. And so I was like, well, that's interesting. So knowing, finding out these details on siblings for those side glances, sometimes glancing to the side and not, okay, I've got to find the information out on my grandmother. Oh, I can't find her name anywhere. Instead of going through like that and pulling your hair out. Did grandma have any siblings? Have you met any great aunts and uncles? You'd be surprised. I actually found my grandfather's school records because I searched his twin sister's name. And I found her school records, and then his was right next to hers because they had the same first initial, but their second letter was different. But they always ran him first on the register, then her, and so I was able to find his records through her name rather than through my grandfather's name. And then I was able to verify they were at the right school because I knew who my great aunts and uncles were, and I was able to look for his siblings in the same school and able to tie him into that school as well. So there's times when you are looking for information that the siblings can provide the key that you need to keep moving up. So when you're working up the ladder of the family tree, sometimes you've got to take a sideways diversion to keep going up. So that's it from me for today. Have a super fantastic sparkling evening, and we'll catch you guys back here at 6 p.m. tomorrow. And here comes my puppy because I said the final words. You want to bring me my shoes, Zeffy? You going to get mommy shoes? Asking her for almost every day for almost 3 years, several times a day. She still won't bring me my shoes. Have a super fantastic sparkling evening. Hey, Konera.